Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody this morning?
Great.
All right, so we are doing a class on farming. Excellent. See how that works when we set you up here? Everybody works better. I can't help myself. All right, so what is farming? Are we talking about going out in the field and planting plants?
No.
Prospecting.
Prospecting. It is prospecting, right? So farming is prospecting.
A specific area repeatedly.
All right, well, hold on. Farming is prospecting. And you say it's an area.
Yes.
What else could it be?
Type.
Neighborhood?
That would be an area.
Civic organization.
It could be a group, okay? So it can be an area or a group. So if you think about it, with your sphere of influence, your database of people that you know, you should be farming them. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are things that you're going to use on a recurring basis with the people that are in your database already. Now, some of the techniques are not going to apply because they're geographically specific. It might be prohibitive to prepare that for 1,000 different areas. But you definitely need to consider that farming is a part of prospecting. Let's talk about, though, prospecting. What are the two types of prospecting?
There's calling and then there's mailing.
Okay, so those are examples of the two types.
Oh.
One of those is active, and one of them is passive, right? So is farming passive or active?
Active. And passive.
It should be both. If you want it to work properly, it should be both. Think about, the reason that we use the word farming instead of some other language is because a lot of the correlations to real farming are the same. Like, we can correlate to it and we can say, well, you could just get a bunch of seeds and put them out in the yard and hope that they grow, or you could put a bunch of seeds out in the yard and then you could follow up with them and you could tend to them and weed them, water them, whatever, and they're going to grow better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with this. I know it's kind of cheesy and whatever, but it's true. So it can be active and passive. Let's assume that we focus on area farming for a minute. Let's do geographic farming, because that's the most common type, right? How many of you live in a neighborhood? Okay. How many of you live in some sort of complex, apartment or otherwise, condo? Okay. So you have a built-in area that you could farm, right? Why shouldn't you farm the area that you will live in?
Sure.
I think it depends.
Because you don't want your neighbors mad at you. When a house
Well, if you're good at your job, hopefully they won't be mad at you, so that's not an issue. But what about your neighborhood makes it a good target for you to farm?
Because you know it.
You know it, it's close. Okay. What if you live in an apartment complex? Should you farm that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? Good buyer leads, possibly. But here's the thing. What if you live in an apartment complex that is, and I'm going to be really off-center here, what if the apartment complex is, the average rent's about $600 a month, and you really, from your business plan, you want to be selling houses that are $300,000 to $400,000 a month. A month. $300,000 to $400,000. Is that your target audience?
No.
It is if you get a really good appraiser.
Or a mortgage lender that doesn't know what they're doing, right? Because that's not the same target audience. So the main reason you would not want to farm your neighborhood is because you don't happen to live in a neighborhood that meets your business plan. Okay? Because think about it. If your business plan is that you want to sell $500,000 to $600,000 houses, that's your average sales price, and you live in a neighborhood of $200,000 houses, those two don't line up. You have to focus on this as a business. This is a business. Yes, it is easier to farm your neighborhood than anything else. because you know people there, assuming you're not, you know, a hermit that live in your house and never talk to anybody. You're going to run into people, you're going to know people. If there's association or any other activities where you're going to interface with people, you're going to have a better opportunity for that. Plus, you're there local, so you can claim to be the local expert that lives there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are all good things. But if it doesn't fit your business plan, if your neighborhood is not your business plan, then don't do it. There's nothing wrong with not farming your neighborhood. It's not a, oh, you have to farm your neighborhood. Here's the other question. What if you live in a neighborhood that's dominated by another agent? And when I say dominated, I don't mean they do like 2 or 3 out of 10. I mean they do like 8 or 9 out of 10 transactions in the neighborhood. Is it worth farming?
No.
Why not?
Well,
Competition's good.
let's look at it as a business approach, though. If I'm going to have to go after somebody that has a stronghold on it, whereas I can go to the neighborhood next door that's very similar to our neighborhood, and there's nobody really in there that has a stronghold, is my dollar that I spend on farming going to be more effective next door or in my neighborhood?
Next door.
Next.
Next door, but I mean, if Walmart thought like that, they wouldn't be where they're at today. I mean, you know, I mean.
Well, don't get me started on Walmart.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's the thought process is to get in and you know, take the biggest market share you can. So maybe start the other one and then come back to yours.
And that might be definitely where we want to go. And remember, this is a series for newer agents. So as a new agent, you might not have the back to take out a powerhouse like that. But you can come back and take it.
I've got their back. I got Caldwell Banker.
Well, absolutely. I don't want to
I
argue
mean, if
with
it's a
that.
local, I mean, it's a local person.
I won't argue with that. All right. So there are reasons not to farm your own neighborhood. But you got to take that into consideration with what you're doing. So you got to think about it. All right. So let's assume that your neighborhood is off the chart. You're not allowed to do your neighborhood for whatever reason, one reason or another. Maybe there's only 15 houses in your neighborhood. That's not a big enough farm to be useful, right? Okay. So how do you pick an area? I mean, that's the most important question, right? How do you pick? Somebody help me. What's the best way to pick an area to farm?
Whatever fits your business plan, like you said.
First, you got to start with your business plan, right? So if you want to average 350 or 400 or whatever your average sales price is in your business plan, I would strongly suggest picking a neighborhood where that is the bottom price point in that neighborhood.
Do a CMA on the neighborhood. If it fits your business plan, that's what you go after.
Definitely. But how might you localize, how might you narrow down to find that neighborhood?
Well, zip code or...
I think you have to use information from the MLS to see what the activity is.
I think the best way to go is into the MLS and do a price or other, you know, criteria search for solds. Because we don't care about actives at the moment, we care about solds. 12 months back. I don't know this fits. 12 months back. So for instance, should I be searching in Savannah? We're in Atlanta.
No.
No.
Unless you have a plane and you can show how.
I mean, you know, I happen to own a helicopter, and so I'm going to service in Savannah, right? Yeah. Oh, that was funny. Oh, man. Really?
I'm sorry.
All right. It's a good thing that went on camera. You want to pick an area that you can get to, right? I mean, your neighborhood is one of the best reasons to farm your neighborhood is that it's very convenient, right?
Right.
You can get to a listing appointment in your neighborhood faster than anywhere else in the city.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a reason to look. So I like to do a map search, say I'm here, and maybe go out. How many miles do you want to go out?
Well, half a mile.
I say go out a mile and a half.
From your house?
No, a mile. A mile will be closer.
Okay, so if we're looking for, let's back up. All right, the criteria we're looking for. What is the criteria we're looking for in a neighborhood that we want to sell? First of all, we know it's got to be in the price range that we want it to be, right? Okay.
Got to be a lot of sales in it.
There's got to be a lot of activity in it.
Right.
We want high activity. Which is another reason why you might not want to do your own neighborhood, is because, you know, if you live in a neighborhood like mine where only 2 people sell a year, it's not really worth spending a lot of money farming on. I mean, you know, we're trying to bang for a buck here, right? We want to be effective business people. So we want high level activity. So if we do a radius around us, and that radius is only a mile, what about this neighborhood right here that fits the criteria perfectly? It's 1.5 miles out. What about this neighborhood here that's 5 miles out? Are you not willing to drive 5 miles? What about 10 miles?
Depends on which side of 285 or 85.
Depends on where you are, right?
Exactly. But you got to take
So
that
you
into
got to take
consideration.
that in consideration. You know, I live inside the perimeter, so I might not go beyond the perimeter in my search, because having to cross it is, you know, the challenge for most of it. But you know, I might be willing to. It just depends on who you are. You got to. That's a personal decision. But my suggestion is that 1 mile is not near enough. I would do at least 10.
Oh.
I think that depends on the density.
But bear with me here. I would do at least 10 to start with, because remember, we're trying to find the best neighborhood to work in.
A 10-mile radius?
That's 20 miles across.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's 10 miles from you. Remember, we're only going to pick one neighborhood. So we're not going to have to drive back and forth from one side of the circle to another. We're only driving from your house to the neighborhood. You're not going to drive more than 10 miles. Okay? Everybody okay with that? I know. Go get an electric car if you're worried about gas. All right?
no, I was just thinking that you're getting a lot of information from an area much further away from where you're at with a 10-mile radius.
Well, it's no more than 10 miles from you. Remember, the center of the center is you.
In every direction.
Right. Okay? And so what I would start with is a 10-mile radius and start to look at the level of activity. Start to look at the price points. Be very specific. You know? Say, okay, my average sales price is I want to sell houses that are $350. I'm going to search for houses that have sold between $350 and $450. Okay? Be very specific so that you can be an expert on that specific thing. Okay? Maybe you only want to sell houses in swim tennis neighborhoods. Maybe you only want to sell houses, you know, I mean, be specific. Start to figure out the attributes. What is another reason to pick a neighborhood? I talk about Redfield up the street all the time, right? Why do I talk about Redfield?
Because you want to live there.
No, I don't really want to live there, but I think it's a nice neighborhood. I think it has great amenities. I think it's a great location. It's very obvious because I used to drive by it every day. So from that standpoint, I like it. I like the houses in it. I like the you know, everything about it. Well, maybe not everything about it, but a lot of stuff about it. And so if I like the neighborhood, am I going to be able to work it better than a neighborhood that I maybe don't like?
Yeah.
If there's a neighborhood of all modern, you know, like mid-century moderns, which there are several around Atlanta, if there's a mid-century modern neighborhood and you like traditional homes and not so much the modern stuff, should you farm a modern neighborhood?
No.
No, right? You want to farm something that you like about. Remember, this is you. This is your personality. This is your choice, which is part of the reason why maybe your neighborhood's a good choice, because it's you chose to live there, so obviously you should like it. So, you know, those are opportunities. The other thing is that you want to look for, and there are people, you know, that you want to live there. There are people that live here right now but want to live here in the future. Well, guess what? Go ahead and start farming the here now, because then when you do get there and move there, you're going to go. Okay? So we look in this 10-mile radius, and we start to narrow down the criteria. We start to narrow down the neighborhoods, the amount of activity that we're seeing. And you're probably going to have to do it, you know, a section at a time and zoom in and see, and, you know, density of things, and kind of get a feel for it. And you might narrow it down to 5 miles. You might narrow it down to just the top half or the bottom half or whatever, okay? You might cut out a section of it because of some, you know, crossing 285, for instance, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Everybody, you know. So, you know, you just have to keep that in consideration. Now, I will tell you, fairly consistently in Atlanta in particular, inside 285 versus outside 285 is a different neighborhood, period. And so, you know, even in the exact same seemingly area, it's very different. I mean, look at the difference between Brookhaven and Dunwoody, inside, outside. It's just different. Some people, I mean, it depends on who you ask as to why you think it's different. There's no argument that it is different, because it is. Okay. All right. What else about the area? What about the area? We know we want high activity. We want the dollar figure. We want the criteria that matches us. That, you know, fits our business plan, fits our personality, fits our property type. What else? How big do we need it to be?
Maybe 300.
All right, I hear 300. Let's go. How big? All right, I got 300. Anybody else?
I think it all depends on how much you want to spend farming.
Can definitely, money can play a role in it.
Yeah.
But let's assume that farming is going to work and we're going to make money off of it. How big can you handle? What do you think the expected, like if we do 300 and we farm it for a year, how much business should we get out of that?
10%.
So you think we get 30 deals out of 300 houses?
That's high.
If 30 houses sell out of 300, that's active. The chances are that we might get 10% of the ones that come on the market.
You get 3.
3.
So that'd be 3.
So you need
About 1%. You know, mailing, especially if you just talk mailing. Now, we can increase those chances, and I know agents that get much better returns off of their farming techniques than others. Part of that has to do with how long you've been in the business and how long you farm the same area, because farming is all about consistency. Okay? We're going to talk all about that in a minute. But let's assume, worst case scenario, you're only going to get 1% return out of it. Here's the question. Is farming going to be where you get all of your business? If your business plan says I need 12 transactions this year, then I need to do 1,200 farm, right? 1,200 person farm?
Mm-hmm.
no, because you're gonna have people from like the grocery store and
Yes. No. The number one mistake people make is you cannot rely on your farm to feed you everything, especially in the first year. Okay? There's a reason why we didn't lead off this series with this class. We're in week 17 here, right? Why didn't we talk about this earlier?
Or your sphere of influence first.
Because active versus passive. Farming by its very nature is more passive than active. We are definitely going to talk about ways to make it active and try to, you know, super inject it and make it more effective than it normally is, but typical farming, traditional farming, is fairly passive. It takes time. Most farming programs don't result in any business worth noting, you know, beyond one or so, outside of the first year. Which is why so many gurus across the land say that this is archaic and complete waste of time. So if I'm here to tell you, because you know me, I always watch I know lots of people out there, I watch a lot of stuff, I talk to people across the country, I know what people are talking about, techniques. I know people right now that are doing online crazy stuff and generating business doing that. Why am I talking about traditional farming?
Because it's basic and it works if you keep at it.
It does. It still works. I mean, there's a reason why our office has the market share that it has in this area, because we, as an office, as a group, consistently farm this area.
If you don't believe that, go ask Robin Glass.
Go ask any of them. We send 30, 40,000 postcards a month out of this office. I have agents that farm Tucker, for instance. I have an agent that has farmed Tucker for years. When she sends out a mailing, she gets 2 or 3 listings per mailing. That didn't happen overnight. That is not a side effect of, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to go out and send out 1,000 cards and get 3 or 4 listings. You know, sweet. What's her card say? I want mine to say that. It's not about that. It takes time. It takes recognition, right? People know her name there. People know who she is. They know us. It's a consistent presence. It takes time. But here's the issue. If you don't start at some point, you'll never have created that environment. So that's why we are talking about it now rather than later. We are theoretically 17 weeks in, right? So we're starting it now. We've started to do the active stuff. You should have business. If you don't have business, you got to go back through the last 16 weeks and do what you need to do to go out and get business. Once you've got that train rolling, it's time to put this one on the side track that's going to parallel you and go along with you. Because it's a dual system that you got to work with. All right. So in thinking about that, number one reason we limit our farm is budget. So we'll come back to that. How often do we need to contact these people? How often do we need to mail them something? Let's say
At a minimum, I would say once a month.
I agree with that. So if you think about it, if you're going to mail stuff once a month, that's going to cost you X amount of dollars. And you got to figure, can you afford to do that for the next year without getting anything out of it? Because that's how you have to go into it. You have to assume that that year worth of mailing is not going to make you any money.
Would it be worth taking?
I'm getting some weird reactions.
Would it be worth taking a smaller neighborhood closer to your budget to do, for a year? I mean, to possibly not get something out of it.
As long as I would say, as long as they have a lot of sales.
As long as
Once you go back there, yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, the number one
Smaller.
criteria is making sure it's the right price point and there's enough activity. Okay? We need to see that activity or else. And so, remember I said go 12 months? The other thing you need to do is once you kind of establish, okay, there's a lot of activity in 12 months, let's go back 24 months and see, was the activity the year before similar? Do we see a consistent history of activity? Or was it just a spike in activity and everybody is new in the neighborhood so that we're not going to sell for another 3 or 4 years? And that's a waste of time. Okay? So, to answer that, I would say that I might look at, for instance, a neighborhood. I'm going to use my neighborhood again because it's a good example. My neighborhood has 725 homes in it. So I could start hitting my neighborhood 725 homes. I might not be able to afford that. So what if I can only afford part of that? Well, what I might do is pick one part of my neighborhood. My neighborhood happens to be divided between 2 school districts. So I could pick one school district to start with and then add the other school district after I kind of start making some more money and it makes it more valuable in my budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the question, which school district should I pick?
The
A
better.
higher performing
Or-
school.
Okay. Notice I didn't name them. All right. So that definitely is an option. So you want to look at what your budget is and can you grow. And so when you're picking the best area, because remember, the main thing we're talking about today is how to pick your area, because that's an important decision. You really have to make, you need to take some time and put some effort into it, okay? Now, the other things you might look at, we've been doing a lot of every door direct mailing in this office lately, okay? So that's using postal route. Well, a postal route is a set number of people, right? You can't do part of a postal route. But that postal route may also not cover a whole neighborhood because it may go this way and another one comes this way. All right? So you got to make a decision. Is it better for me to do the postal route because it's more cost effective and miss this group, or is it better for me to do traditional mailing, whether it's bulk or first class, and do just this? I don't know. What do you think?
It depends on your budget.
Depends on your budget. It depends on the area. It depends on what else you're picking up. I mean, if you think about it, if that postal route runs into an area that all of a sudden this price point's not the right thing, it either went way up or way down, maybe that's not a good choice. But if it's just as cost effective to send the whole postal route as it is to send this little area, maybe it is a good choice, right? So you got to take that into consideration. The program's called Every Door Direct. We print them here in the office. You go to the website and just Google it, and it's a postal service, and they will tell you. You can actually online highlight postal routes, and they will tell you exactly where they're going and how many houses it is.
It also gives you demographic detail about what's on the route, people's
does.
ages,
Income,
all kinds
all kinds of stuff.
of detailed data.
Stuff that you can choose to use on how you look at what your target market is. Okay? Because I did it in my neighborhood. I was surprised what the average income was in my neighborhood, to be honest. It's a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. But it's interesting to look around and look at the different routes around you and see how that number fluctuates and whether that maybe affects what your target is. Okay? All right. So if we're going to mail once a month, that's going to affect our cost, right? What else might we spend money on? Because that's kind of, remember, we're talking about it today as far as limiting our budget for doing farming, right? So what else might we spend money on in farming? If we're going to do a mailing once a month.
You gotta mail something, so what is it that you're
Door
gonna
Door
mail?
hangers.
We're going to talk about that. So you might do some door hangers. You might have some stuff to hang it out, right?
Magnets. Put on the mailbox.
The stuff to hand out, because that could be door hanger, and we'll talk in detail. So just to kind of give you a little preemptive heads up, next week when we do class, we'll talk in detail about the stuff, what the content is. Because until you pick an area, it doesn't really matter what the stuff is, right? You've got to take some time to pick the area. Drive the areas. Get familiar with them. That sort of thing. All right. So what other stuff might cost us money?
A quick question. On the door hangers, is that considered solicitation?
It can be, yes.
Okay, because I know that a lot of the higher income places, they have big signs at the entrance. There's no
Not necessarily
solicitation.
higher income, just how organized they are.
Yeah.
Whether it says no solicitation or not. So yes, you got to take that in consideration. We'll talk all about that in detail. What other things related to farming might cost you money?
Labels. Well, no, you've already taken care of it.
Yeah, I mean, that all goes into the mailing aspect.
Signage.
Signage? What kind of signage?
I'm just thinking if you put up a simple sign, in in the right of way, advertising your services.
Okay. So you might do some signage. We can go into detail about that later. Signage or other kind of advertising. How about that?
Yeah.
Because here's a question. In a specific area, if there's a publication that covers that area, does it hurt or help your marketing to do something in addition to mailing? If you do advertising in that publication, does that help your mailings?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
reinforcement.
Because it's reinforcing the brand. You know, what if you got a billboard? What if, you know, this particular neighborhood has a billboard right at its opening, and you put a sign on the billboard? Would that make your mailings more impactful? You know it would. Now, the question is, that might be really cost prohibitive. Well, no, with the new electronic billboards, they're a lot cheaper than they used to be.
Are they?
Oh, significantly.
How much
Because
does
they,
it cost for
because they get a lot more people to buy ads on
Well,
the same
right.
billboard, so the cost comes down.
I mean, you're sharing a billboard space with, you know, 5 or 10 different people, and so yes, you're not going to get exposed to everyone that comes by, so you're paying a portion of what the total costs. And the thing with billboards is it's all about where they are and which direction they face, because that's the cost factor. If it's covered by trees and, you know, you can't really see it, it's cheap. If it's highly visible where people are sitting on the exit ramp, like we're getting off at North Beach Street, and it's right there, it's expensive. Even on shared cost is expensive. But, you know, the question is how effective is it? Well, it might not be effective by itself, but it's going to be more effective if you do this stuff with it. Okay?
Is the billboard price measured by the number of views or cars? Isn't it by the traffic? That
They
goes
correlate it to the traffic that comes by.
by?
So, because the potential for visibility basically is tied to that, usually.
Let's say if you pick your neighborhood with something like a car magnet,
Mhm.
be effective.
Sure. So some on signage, I think that'd fall under signage, but yeah, that could go, you know, on your car. I mean, you know, if you want to go all out, go get your car wrapped, right? You can do full graphics on your car, and now, as long as you don't live in a townhome community where it says you can't park a commercial vehicle in the driveway,
Because our HOA has
which, you know, some of them do.
that. Yeah.
But, you know, even if you're just driving through the neighborhood and still park in the garage,
It's effective.
it's still good. People are going to see it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have agents that have car magnets, and they get talked to at the gas station or whatever, random places. You know, people ask questions.
If you wrap your car, your whole car, talk to your accountant, because it's a huge tax on
It can it definitely changes
Let me tell you.
the
Big
percentage of use of your vehicle that's
Absolutely.
personal versus business.
Absolutely.
Because as you drive off anywhere, you are creating business.
Yeah,
You're literally a roving billboard. All right, what else do we think we need to do from a farming perspective? Let's talk about activities in general now. And some of them might cost and some of them might not.
Door knocking.
Door knocking is definitely a way to go. That's where the stuff to hand out can come in handy, right? So when you're door knocking, it's good to give people stuff. What else can you do activity-wise?
Call.
Phone calls. What else? Let's say technology.
Email.
E-blast, right?
So how would you e-blast?
We're going to talk in detail about it, so we'll get to them. Let's just try to get a
Social-
list of activities.
Social media advertising.
Social media stuff. E-blast and social media, we'll pull those together. What else?
Going to events and that.
Events. Those are, I mean, we shouldn't be missing those, right? Every event you can go to. I was at a friend of mine's birthday party for her kid yesterday. Not yesterday. Day before yesterday. Whatever. She was wearing a T-shirt with her name and information on it. You gotta decide where to draw the line, but, you know, it reminds people, right?
That'd be a good thing to do in a bar.
Well, it depends on who your target audience is. Might not be for me. Who else? What
You
else
could-
can you do? What other kind of
You
activities?
could sponsor events. You could buy a sponsorship of,
You
a,
can
say,
do some sponsoring.
a kickball game or a club or an organization or whatever, a race.
Or what about sponsoring, like, a lot of neighborhoods have like a little green space or something like that. You could sponsor managing it, maintaining it. From a cost standpoint, that might not be very much other than you going out there with a lawnmower and cutting it and keeping the bushes trimmed or whatever and putting in new flowers. So that's not going to cost too much, right? But if cutting grass is not your thing, that's probably not a good choice, right? All right. What else can we do in a neighborhood? Let's talk about sponsoring. I want to throw another one out there while you're thinking about it. What about garage sales? Neighborhood garage sale events. Providing signage. Our signs are great to cover with things that say, or you could even, if you're going to do it on a regular basis, you could get custom signs made up that say, neighborhood garage sale this Saturday from 9 to 5, sponsored by, Brett Duffy with Coal Banker, right? That gets you marketing. What else can we do? What other activities can we do in a farming area? We're real estate agents, right? So what should we do?
Send them stuff about the market.
Well, we're not talking about what we're sending them. What activity? What's today? Today's a Tuesday. And in Atlanta on Tuesday, what do agents do?
Caravan.
Caravan. So what should we do in a market area that we're trying to focus on?
Caravan.
Let's be more general. We want to preview. We want to look at, right? The agents I know that owns a market by 80–90%, part of the reason? Because she's sold every single house in there over the number of years. She's been in every single one of them. You want to get inside the houses so you know what they look like. So you know how they compare to each other. So when one's on the market, you better get inside it and look at it and know it, right? My neighborhood, I have second and third generation agents that service my neighborhood. I have a ton of agents in my neighborhood. I think I have close to 40 agents in my neighborhood. You mentioned I only have 725 houses. I think it's fun because it's... But I have second and third generation agents in my neighborhood that can tell you not just who the person was that just sold the house, but the family that lived in it before that and the family before that, and they swam on a swim team with them. That's personal connection, right? Some people are into that. People are not. What else? In the lines of previewing, what else do you need to do relative to the neighborhood? We've figured out, based on criteria and things, what the neighborhood is. What else should you do?
Research.
Research. Definitely you need to do some research. Because it's critically important that you know this neighborhood better than anyone else. If I talk to you about your farm, if your farm is Redfield, we'll use them as an example, and I say, well, what's the average sales price this year in Redfield compared to last year?
You should know.
You better know it, right? If I say to you, what's the average number of bedrooms for a house in Redfield? That's a trick, right? That might be something that would be impressive if you could tell me that, right? One of the nice things about this house that just got listed is it's a 6-bedroom, and the average in this neighborhood is only about a 4. So this is a significantly larger house than most of the houses in this neighborhood. I sound like I know what I'm talking about? That's good. And I just made that up.
So that's what we do?
But that's the same sort of conversation that you could have if you had the data, if you knew what you were talking about from a standpoint of, what the average size house is. Do most of the houses in the neighborhood have basements or not? Are most of the basements finished, or in this neighborhood are they not? Are they maybe they're finished, but they're not like, Mac Daddy theater rooms and all that kind of stuff. They're just kind of basement-y. Maybe they're not really basements. People call them basements, but they're really cellars because they're really not tall enough to finish. Isn't that something that people should know? Think about all those things that you need to know about the neighborhood. All right. I don't want to go any further into what we're going to do to farm, because I want you to focus on picking an area. Over the next week, I want you every single day to think about it. Even if in the next 2 days you come up with, okay, you know what, Redfield's it, that's what I'm going to target, I'm going after it. I want you to then reevaluate it every day beyond that to determine, is that the best target for you? Because the other thing we didn't write up here, we talked about it, but competition matters. And there's two approaches to competition. I'm going to go in and I'm going to knock them out, or I'm going to go in where the low-hanging fruit is and dominate it, and then when I'm powerful and strong, I'm going to come back and knock them out.
Well, you know, like,
Either way.
I just take my neighborhood for I live in the Branches.
Okay.
So, Karen Cannon had, when I moved in, she pretty much had everything. But now when you look around, you see some
Lots
Keller
of
Williams. Yeah, I mean, there's, Berkshire Hathaway, Keller Williams, and I'm like, well, I haven't seen one Caldwell Banker. And we got it's right there. Right there.
And the nice thing about the Branches, it's right there. You're right photobombing me.
Yeah. So,
The nice thing about the Branches, though, is that it's a fairly good-sized neighborhood, but it spans 2 different counties.
it's huge. Yeah.
So that's a great opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to start on my side first,
Right.
and then I can grow out and go both sides.
And there's a lot of older people, I think, there that are because I've seen a lot of people that are moving because they're actually moving, they're downsizing. Yeah, and that's happened a lot. I'm seeing it a lot.
And remember, that's the other thing you have to look at in a neighborhood, which brings up a good point, is the cycle. Think about a new construction neighborhood. We build a neighborhood, and this is going to be extremely direct, but say we build a neighborhood like, well, what's being built over next to Georgetown, right? What did they put in there first before they start building houses?
They normally put a, well, in this case, they put a park, but
What kind of park?
a playground.
A playground, right?
You just put them in
So-
first.
So they have a playground that is gorgeous. If you haven't been there, it's beautiful. And they have pavilions and a park and the whole nine, because the city, it was a joint project. So the city did their part first and put in all the play structures and the parks and the green space. And now the builders coming back around and putting in houses. What do you think the most likely, now there's a variety and anybody can buy any house, what do you think the most likely target audience for that is?
Young people, couple of kids.
People with or getting kids, right? Because, most people don't move in next to a playground unless they want to use it, right? So from that standpoint, this is a brand new subdivision. Over the next year, as it builds out, it will get filled up with new young people, let's assume. There'll be a mix, I would hope, that there'd be some diversity, but let's assume the majority of people are going to be young people moving in. Okay? With that assumption, if we assume that those people have kids, those kids grow up, then those people want to, at some point, downsize, right? So that neighborhood, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 15 years from now, will be full of mostly people without kids. And then they'll start to sell off, and who will move in at that point?
People
Kids.
It's the cycle of a neighborhood. People move in as first-time home buyers, straight out of school or whatever, young. They live there until they grow older. they move on to something else, and they're replaced by people that are first-time home buyers, young and moving in the cycle and going around and around, right? So you got to look at where your neighborhood that you're targeting might be in the cycle. Now, the interesting thing is that over time, unless it's a new neighborhood like this one, the consistency of, across the board, like in the branches, there's a huge diversity of who lives in the branches. I mean, there's all age ranges and all, it's a huge, because it's been there for a long time. I mean, the branches have been there for a long time. And so this cycle may not apply as much to that. But if it's a newer area, especially as you get into some of these suburban, developed cookie-cutter subdivisions, you've got to look at the cycle. Because if they're, 1 or 2 years into the cycle or 3 or 4 years into the cycle, their turnover is probably not very good. But they may have had a bunch of sales in the last couple of years as people were moving in, but you got to look at where that's going to go. Okay, so definitely pay attention to the cycle, and that's a point in the branches that is really not as necessary because it's matured, and all neighborhoods go through that. Over time, they will turn. My neighborhood's the same way. It's been around forever. My house to 1957, so it's it's well established. And I have people in my neighborhood that are retirees and living out the ends of their days. And I have brand new young families that are, just not even, they're thinking about having kids. So, you gotta look at where that cycle is, and does that matter? And it might not in your area. Any other comments about picking your area?
If it's an area that you pick and like it's right next door to you, and you haven't seen a lot of signs, how do you know that it's not already being farmed?
Here's the question. It's not a question of whether it's being farmed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a question of, is it being successfully dominated?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because that's the difference. For instance, the branches right now is not dominated by anybody.
No.
It is an open target.
Not really.
Now that you're doing that.
He's like, no.
It's going to be dominated pretty soon.
Ben is the only one that's going to farm it, so all of you back off, right? It's the beauty of real estate, right? You're all independent contractors, so you got to pick the areas that work for you. What you have to look at when you look at the competition. I remember when I was an agent, I worked adjacent to Druid Hills. My office was adjacent to Druid Hills, historic Druid Hills. I love historic Druid Hills. It's cool houses, big mega houses, and just fun, cool neighborhood. I can't live there because I can't afford to live there. I surely couldn't afford to live there when I started as an agent. But I love the neighborhood. It was near my office, and so I picked it as a part that I worked. There are six agents that are power agents in that neighborhood. So sometimes it's not just one, it's multiple. But because I was young and high tech and whatever, and correlating to this is a historic neighborhood, these were all agents that had been around for a long time. And so my thought was, well, I can go in there and I can take them out because I'm the high tech, I bring a whole different market to this. And it would work if you give it enough time. I had a little bit of success, but I didn't stay in it long enough there to be able to work it out. And it's harder to fight against that establishment than you think it is. You see what they do and you think to yourself, God, I could come in and market that house 1,000 times better than they could. But you'll never have a relationship with that seller that they do in the next 10 years. Because they've been there for 20 years. They live there. They know people. And so you've got to take that into consideration. I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying as you pick your area, you've got to pay attention to all that stuff. Just because there's 2 or 3 different companies that are represented in a neighborhood doesn't mean it's not dominated by those 2 or 3 agents. And so you got to look at the numbers, look at the stats, pull it up. You know, out of the in the last year, 20 homes is sold. Who sold them? Was it the same person? Was it multiple people? You know, if it's 10 different people, then there's no real domination. If it's 4 different people, well, then you got to look at it. You know, maybe that's something. But 4 different people is a lot better than 1 as far as being able to compete with. And you just got to go and improve your value. We're going to talk next time about all this stuff that we're going to give them that's going to show that you're worth giving a shot. Okay? But that's your homework for the week. Got to pick an area. Okay? We all good? All right. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
I greatly appreciate it. And we'll turn this off here. Maybe.